All right, here we go. This is the Live with Sondra show. And I'm your host, Sondra Shannon, CEO of Gatemaster Technology, who is bringing you this programming today. And we are going to be talking about inclusive innovation, empowering teams, and enhancing guest experience in attractions. So, my question for the audience today before we get started, and of course, you know that you can leave us messages in the chat. We can't see you. We'd love to hear from you while we're live today and see if you have any questions for our next guest or just to join in and part of the conversation. Feel free to post in the comments below. So, here's what I've got for you today. When you think about enhancing guest experiences at your attraction, what is one change, big or small, that you believe can make a big impact today? So that's our starting question for today. I got a few more for you, but I'd love to hear your thoughts here in the chat. And I want to introduce you to my next guest. My next guest is somebody who I consider an industry friend. She's doing big things in attractions, and she's really getting involved in a lot of organizations where she's having big impact. Just like that question that we asked, I know she's making big impact. My guest for today is Marah Rodriguez, and she is the Regional VP of Sales at Mobaro. She's an expert in driving innovation through digital solutions for safety, maintenance, and operational efficiency in attractions. She's an experienced advocate for collaboration across departments to improve the guest experience. She's passionate about creating inclusive innovation environment, inclusive. I'm tongue tied. There's a lot of I's here. She's passionate about creating inclusive innovation and innovative environments through small, impactful changes. She volunteers with IAAPA, Ames International, NARSO, and while doing this all while serving as the chair of the IAAPA Water Park Committee. And when we asked her what she cannot live without, I love the answer. She cannot live without her dogs. If you know me, you know I am also a dog person and I can't live without my dogs either. So, without further ado, please help me welcome Marah to the stage.
Marah.
Marah!
See, your person put Mariah in there, and it got you thinking.
I got you the first time, right? Oh, you know what? I hate when I do that because I get all tongue-tied.
Oh, it's fine.
Marah.
Mariah, Marah, whatever you'd like to call me, it's fine.
Oh, goodness. I can't believe I made that mistake. Just so you guys know what we're talking about, I always ask at the beginning of the show, like confirm pronunciation. And we had a back and forth in the office of how to pronunciate your name. And I said Marah and somebody said Mariah, and then we talked about it. And then that was what was in my head. So I do apologize. But hey, while we're on the topic of who you are, Marah, and what you are doing, is there anything else that you want to add to that bio? Because you are lovely and somebody that I so enjoy seeing at industry events. And I know that the work that you are doing is making a big impact. But is there anything else you want to add? I know you said that there's something with IAAPA that's kind of exciting.
Yeah, I mean, I think for the most part, I try to involve myself in bettering the industry in however way I can. So, in the role that I have today, we help a lot of parks, drive they're changing from going from paper to digital or changing the processes to bettering their processes. So in that aspect, I'm very lucky that I'm part of an organization that does that as part of my role. But in terms of other areas, I try to help wherever I can. So at Ames, I try to help in Latin America and some of the classes that they're providing to the Latin American constituency. I also try to volunteer in whatever classes they need help with. I also teach some classes at NARSO when it comes to aquatics. And, just recently, besides being the chair of the IAAPA Water Park Committee, I've been on the committee. This will be my last year as chair. I've been on that committee for 7 years, and it's been wonderful. It's great to be with industry people, in every aspect, right? But recently, I'm also helping with there's a women's task force that just started, and so that's kind of new in terms of IAPA.
I love that. I love that. And you're such a great person to be there. And I mean it when I say, like, every time I see you at events, I'm like, yes, because it is so nice to see somebody like you who's involved in so many of these organizations and and helping attractions do better at what they do, but also you always have a smile on your face, and I really appreciate that.
Thanks. And then the other thing that we recently kind of come together, and I came together with some other industry people, with Una and Emily and Jessica from Santa Cruz Boardwalk, and we're created this online group called the Female Leaders of the Amusement Park and Attractions, where we're trying to have a community to support each other in what we do. So yeah, just trying to put my seed of positivity everywhere I go.
Yeah, I love that, and I love that you started that organization, and thank you for having me. I know you had a webinar for Women's International Day, and back in March, and that was really fun to, one, be a part of, but two, connect with some really great leaders in the industry who are women who are kind of breaking these barriers that we talk about, like we did on the show or on the webinar, and some of what we talk about here on my show. So thank you for being here.
I appreciate the opportunity. And of course, I've never been on a podcast, so this is a new venture for me. So hopefully, people will enjoy it and get something out of it.
Yeah, you're doing great. And I mean, for me, I get tongue tied all the time. I always tell people, I'm like, anything goes on this show because it's just, you know what? Let me just tell the audience, it's not easy to get up here and do this, especially, knowing that sometimes you can, you can say things and it's out in the ether forever. So, but what I
Yeah,
found is,
no pressure, no pressure. Yeah.
joking. So, I want to talk about a little bit about what you guys are doing with with data and digital solutions, if that's okay. I think it's pretty cool what you guys are doing. And I'm curious if you wouldn't tell us a little bit about the company that you represent and kind of how you are working with attractions right now and the impact that that has.
Yeah, so I work for a company called Mobaro, and we really, we say we've been in the digitization of checklists, since 2025. But I think, even since I started working there, it has evolved for a lot more than that, because we are involved not only in the processes that facilities are doing, but how to train your staff better, and how to bring not only, and a lot of people think of Mobaro as just a maintenance software, but it's really a lot more than that. But it's how to bring all of the teams together on one platform so they can communicate better and essentially do the work that is needed to have a safe environment for your guests to come in, and have it in one platform to make it, very easy. Hopefully, I described that in a way that everyone understands.
Yeah, and so just so I understand, you are digitizing these processes for them in a way that makes it easy and accessible for their team members to access?
Correct. So there's a lot of processes that happen in a day when you're about to open your park, whether that is, an operational checklist, pre-opening checklist, or perhaps a maintenance, whether that's a roller coaster or whether that's a trampoline park or a slide in a water park. There's all these tasks that need to happen in order to to have your guests come in your park. So you can use our platform to, oversee all of those tasks, and for your staff members to be able to follow a way to do those procedures correctly, and it be very easy for them to understand.
Now, with this platform, are they able to like check it off? Like, is there data associated with those processes being
Yeah,
executed?
correct. So um, let's say I'm a maintenance staff, right? And I have, this scheduled checklist that I need to do in the morning. I go into my app and I can access that checklist and do that from anywhere in the park, and be able to immediately complete that checklist, and then that actually gets reported in real time. And the managers are able to oversee and look at, what's happening in the park, what checklists have been done, which ones haven't. And if they're doing this checklist and they find something that they're not, that something is not in compliance, well, what happens to that is almost just as important as actually doing the checklist, because there is a lot of digital tools, but when it comes to safety, and you have to be able to follow, when something's not in compliance. Some things, a lot of people say, well, I use, in other countries they use WhatsApp, or I text this, or but you aren't able to really follow what happens. A lot of things, you might not be able to fix today. It could be, something that happens a month from now. So how do you know that those tasks have been completed when something has been found? And that's really important. But I think where we really stand out is being able to create these processes, that safety culture within these checklists, and really guide them on how to do these the way the company wants them to do, the way the standards, would like them to do, and be able to incorporate that. So if something is not in compliance, well, what happens when something's not in compliance? um, is there additional instructions that you could help guide them to do the next step? Or maybe there is it needs to go to a different department, and then being able to send that to the other department, like we talked about, that communication between teams. So being able to send that, let's say I'm in operations and I'm walking around the park and I see, a garbage that's overflowing. Well, maybe I could take a picture and send that to park services, and then they can start working on that, and shortening that time for that to get to be fixed. Again, a lot of people, when they think about digital solutions, they think about a lot of guest facing technology. And of course, you would be part of that, right?
Sure.
But sometimes we forget that it's just as important, the employee journey, right? And the technology that they use. We have to look at the facility holistically, and everything plays a part, because if you don't maintain your facilities well, that is going to impact your guest experience. If your employees aren't trained properly, then that can affect your guest experience. If I could have a awesome staff that focuses on guest experience, but if my attractions aren't open, it will affect the guest experience, right?
Sure.
Because if my son goes to this facility, and whether that's a water park, an FEC, or whatever the case, if their favorite attraction is down, and every time I go to such and such facility, this attraction's always down, then I will leave disappointed, even if all of my staff, are doing a wonderful job. You could have a terrible experience in food and beverage, and it can impact, when everything else is going right. So, at Mobaro, we tried to connect all of those pieces together to try to enhance, how you operate your park in order to enhance the guest experience. I hope that makes sense.
No, it makes sense. And one of the things that I want to point out to the audience today, because I think this is something that's so important to talk about. That's why I want to have you on the show, because having worked with so many attractions over the years, the ones that really stand out in terms of the best guest experiences, the best customer service and hospitality, the best safety are always those that have that kind of special sauce, right? Like they've got it figured out. Like, I hate to use McDonald's hamburgers as an example, but every time you go to a McDonald's, you get the same experience. You know what to expect. They know how to do it well. If anybody's, I can't remember the name of that documentary that they had, but they basically, that's their business's process, right? That created what made McDonald's great today. Between you and me, though, I don't eat McDonald's. I saw a video where they like torch.
Neither did I, but you can apply that, to Disney or the
Right, right,
Universals or whatever the
sure,
case,
right.
they
But
have.
truth be told, it's that process that made them great, because I can't deny the fact that what they have is something special and something that made their institution great, just like a Disney or, even Hershey.
Yeah,
Uh, We,
absolutely.
we
I
got,
love Hershey.
I do too. We got so lucky at the North American Summit this year. We got to hear from Chris Hershey, and one of the sentiments I really understood from his talk was, the team and the training, and the integrating of the team happens through training,
Hmm.
right? You and I were talking a little bit about culture before we got started today. What do you see kind of being, how is culture impacted by a organization's ability to collaborate and connect teams with regards to process? I'm curious if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think, and like we were talking right before, you have to think of this in terms of everything that you do. If you're trying to impact your facility in terms of safety or in terms of, we talked about inclusion, you have to look at that every processes that you do, you have to incorporate that. So if I want to change, the safety culture in my facility, then I need to look at how are we doing these processes and how can I incorporate safety in there. So for example, if I'm, building out this checklist, you know, always providing that safety message before you start work before you start this checklist, is it safe to operate? So by doing these little small things where it gets the team members thinking about safety, but you're building it into, everything that you do, you can make these small incremental changes that eventually will make a big difference. If you're, a facility and you want to remind, using the tools of technology, you can remind them, hey, they have to do a lockout tagout procedure, and making sure that ensuring that they do that before they move on. And that's how you can leverage technology to help you build those. But I think it's important to, one, know what those processes are and what you're trying to change to be able to make the change. And I
Yeah.
think, when we first talked about, before I came on the show, I think we were at IAAPA, we talked about, that's really something that I think as an industry we can really work on, is, hey, what processes can I change? Am I looking at how we're doing these processes. Are we looking at it every year? And I know, there are a lot of facilities that are very good at this, but there are a lot of facilities that still need to work at it. And I also think that, you know, it's really hard when you don't know, right? So there's so many places that have, the resources to be able to go to the Ames and the NARSO and the ASTM, but there are also a lot of facilities that don't. And one of the things that is on my mind is, how can we get knowledge out there, right? How can we as an industry help each other out so that it becomes a standard? I mean, that's why you see AI is so, blowing up when you think about chat gpt. What is essentially, why is it so big? It's because it's knowledge sharing and giving that knowledge to other people. And us as an industry, I think, we can learn from that and say, how can we help each other out? How can we provide access to that information?
Yeah, I 100% agree with you because, like I said, having worked with so many institutions in the attractions industry, the ones that do documentation and process very well are organized. I mean, they're gems. I love working with them. We get so much further we can in terms of progress because we're not trying to figure those things out over and over and over again. And I agree with you in so much that so many times many of the owners or operators of attractions, they just don't know how to do it. They don't even know how to begin. And so what you guys are doing is so incredibly strong for this industry, not only ensuring this information, but teaching people how to do it and organize it in a way that makes it super accessible for their team and also creates a culture of training.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and yeah, our software, and not just because, I work for the company, but we try to look at all of those things, and how can we connect? Hey, I want to make sure that the person is trained on the checklist that, that they're providing. How can we connect that? So we have, a training portion of our software that allows that to happen. But yeah, I think we still have a long way to go, and there is sort of a gap, when it comes to content. And it's really surprising sometimes to see, when you have a facility, for example, that might not have, some of these processes in place. And a lot, a lot of people in this industry just take it for granted, and they're like, oh yeah, this SOP, and we do this on a daily basis. But there are, some facilities that don't have those processes in place and need that help. So, um, hopefully we'll get to a point where we're all sharing, like, and this is on another, project that I've done, because I've had manufacturers say, hey, you know, we're struggling where, we provided the manual to the customer, we provided, this or that, and still they're not completing the task the way it's intended. So how can we gather some of that knowledge that the manufacturers and suppliers have, and give that to our, industry, so that they have access to it and know that it's available to them? So that's a whole other side project, right? Like, how can we get some of that information so that we could share it across?
Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of times we as owners, operators of attraction, we do what we do really well in terms of like the experience. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here, right? You know, you've got something really special. I would venture to say if you're opening an attraction, you know, you got something really special, right? and something special that you want to share with the world and for people and the impact it's going to have on people. But what I find over and over again, because I don't know if you know this about me, but my husband and I also coach business owners um,
Yes.
to their first million. That's about what we do. So we coach business owners to their first million. And over again, I see this trend where they are exceptional at the thing that they do, the thing that made that business a business. But where they're weak is in creating a business,
Mm-hmm.
which is what process is. That's where business is done, is in the creation of processes, in the creation of the SOPs, the stuff that you do over and over again so you can duplicate the amazing thing that you do.
Mm-hmm.
And at the expectation of the guest, because they're going to have that expectation every single time if you deliver that same thing. Having worked in on our side, we have guest facing technology, but also, working with teams. Oftentimes when we start a project and we ask them, what does this look like for you? They don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say even more so today than prior to the pandemic, because as you know, and maybe you will or won't agree with me, I think we lost a lot of that legacy knowledge during that time. I don't know about you, but if I had a park shut down in 2020, they didn't reopen until 2021, and a lot of their legacy team that were amazing people, they went and got jobs elsewhere because they had no choice at that time. So we lost a lot of institutional knowledge. So I think what's cool about what you guys are doing, not only sharing that information, but helping people gather it in a way that it helps them fulfill their purpose.
Yeah, and I mean, and that's an industry trend for sure that we hear. You have people that have worked there, for 20 years or 10 years, or they have a lot of knowledge. And how do you pass that down to the newer generation that are coming behind you? And the way you can do that is really by looking at your processes and gathering that information from the people that know. Um, One of the things that we encourage some of our customers is, make videos of how to do this. Right? There's nothing better than seeing a teammate who has been there a long time, be able to do that process, and you be able to, as a new person, look at this video. Okay, well, here's my team member doing this, X, Y, and Z. And now I have the tool and the knowledge that they have because they're explaining how they've done it and they see it in real time, or having that manual or having that SOP to be able to reference without, especially, newer team members might be intimidated, to ask the question. So being able to leverage that, but mostly, passing down that knowledge is really important because you may have somebody that's been there for 10 years and tomorrow they may not be there, and you have to be able to pass that knowledge on to the newer generation.
Well, I think that's an interesting perspective too, because so many so many people think about leadership as, I think people have it all wrong, right? Like in terms of leadership, because leadership really is a duplication of what you're doing and elevating yourself from this current role because you could teach somebody else, which in turn creates an opportunity and scales a business, right? So what you are truly doing at Mobaro is scaling businesses through processes and documentation, but also really assisting with helping create leaders, because at the end of the day, like, leaders are teachers. Leadership means you go first, right? So you've got to understand the job that's being done.
Yeah, absolutely. But and the other thing I that we haven't really touched on is, you know, what information can you get, right? They're doing all these processes in real time, and how can I make this all this data help me run my business better? So the
Yeah.
analytics, and I'm sure, also on the front, uh, guest facing technology, the analytics that you get and what you do with that information is really important. And it can really give you an opportunity to look at things from a very factual way, black and white, and be able to help you make those business decisions. Like, hey, why is this attraction, down all the time? Maybe it's because of the same reason every single time. And then I can look into, hey, maybe it's time to replace that pump because, it's keeping my attraction closed, or the gearbox, or whatever the case may be, or a trampoline, that keeps breaking. Maybe it's time to replace that, or why is this happening? So you're able to look at things more granular, and things that on paper would be very difficult to do. You have access to have that information in seconds. Or, hey, let's analyze where our incidents are happening and why that's happening in our park. Is it happening at one attraction? Is it, because it was raining, or maybe, a different things that you can look at. But all of the data that's coming in, you can really leverage it to help you see that visibility of what's going on in your park.
Yeah, and that kind of leads me to my next question for you. From your experience, what do you see being the most common roadblocks to implementing digital solutions in attractions, and how do you see them overcoming that?
Well, I think the first one is taking the first step. So, one fun fact about me is that I did jujitsu for a long time. And one of the things that they say in jujitsu is the hardest thing is stepping on the mat, right? So, the hardest thing for a lot of facilities that are doing paper is taking the step to, hey, let's change the way we fundamentally do our processes and go digital. So I think that's one of the hardest things to overcome is, having the mindset that, yes, we want to make this change, and then, taking the step to doing that. And then in terms, and sometimes it's difficult because it's fundamentally changing the way, you're wrapping your head around, I'm going to fundamentally change the way I do things. And that's very hard for people. People in general don't like change. So I'm sure you've heard that, right? They don't like change. But when we think of technology, we have to make that change. And us as an industry, I mean, it is just mind blowing that we're still using paper. We use technology to order our coffee. We use technology to go on a plane. We use it for everywhere in our lives. And the younger generation is coming into this, practically using technology for everything. And it's almost like taking a step backwards to having them fill out a checklist on paper. So that's one big roadblock that I think we need to overcome as an industry. And think about all the paper. And we talk about sustainability, and we have all these big ideas, about sustainability in your parks. Well, there's an easy way to make an easy change, is going digital and not having all these paper processes for everything, for training, for checklists, for all these different areas where you're using paper. And so uh, that's another area.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Is it Gracie Jiu-Jitsu? Did you do Gracie Jiu-Jitsu?
Well, actually, I did Brazilian top team, but it's very similar. I come from a family. My brother is actually a second degree black belt in in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu at Gracie Barra. So my son did it for 7 years, and I said, well, if I'm going to sit here, I might as well join in. And so I have a blue belt, which is, in terms of jujitsu, it's just like the second step. But and also in jujitsu, it took me 4 years to get there. So it's a
Yeah,
good thing for me.
it is a big thing, but I think it's kind of like what you said. Getting on the mat is the hardest thing. And I don't know if you know this, my husband and I have a wrestling uh,
Oh no, I
company.
didn't know
Yeah, so we work
that.
a lot with jujitsu, wrestlers and those who do jujitsu and judo and all these different things. But so I didn't know you were a badass too, but I did that. So I love that. I'm glad you shared that. But what you said earlier about getting on the mat being the hardest thing for people, like the first step, right? Because
Hmm.
it is so true. Like oftentimes, I think a lot of businesses are not taking that first step into what the future looks like, not only with technology, but just in terms of change, because it is so important. It's uncomfortable for people. It's uncomfortable for especially those attractions. And I can tell you from my experience, the amount of times I hear we're doing it this way because we've always done it this
Yeah,
way. And to me, it's just like, oh, guys, that doesn't mean it's correct or the
yeah,
right way to do it or the most efficient way of doing it. And like you said, young people now learn on their cell phones.
yeah, exactly. So
So
that it's definitely.
you
But yeah, and the second thing I would say is, and we just talked about, is having your house in order. There's an author that says the way you do one thing is the way you do all things, right? And so think about that in your business. E- Everything that you do has to have, try to do it in excellence and be able to think about your business in that way. So whether I'm in this department, in maintenance department, or in operations, or in guest services, or it everywhere in my business, if I try to do that in excellence, try to get my house in order, review and those standard operating procedures, review your checklist in terms of the attractions every year, and always think about how can I improve this. We can't think of these checklists. Oh, I'm done. And, here's the checklist, and then look at it 10 years later. It should always be a living document, which
yes.
is why digital makes it so easy. If you find something, a process that you can make better, you can make that change very easily in digital. And it could be, put out to everybody in seconds versus, not looking at the checklist, a few years down the line, then you look at it, then you have to print, a million copies of that, and then, not look at that, for a long time.
And then half the team doesn't get the memo.
Yeah, yeah,
Like, so you've got that problem.
yeah. And then you think about just, hey, there's so many different attractions, right? In a park or in a water park, or it's mind blowing sometimes that some checklists come in and they're exactly the same for different attractions. You know, you should look at that because every attraction is different, and
Right.
you know, you should be it should be very specific to that specific attraction, to that specific process, and looking at, it is something that is an ongoing process. You're not going to do that overnight, obviously, but you can start working on that and having those incremental changes. Hey, let me look at one checklist per week. These are things that you can do today, whether you have a digital system or not. That's something that you can do and implement today. How can I review and make processes better?
Well, something that's interesting that you're talking about with regards to making them better, because look, there's no room for not being excellent when it comes to safety, right? I went to this training 2 weeks ago. It was leadership training, and they introduced to us this thing called like a magnitude of impact scale, which is really interesting to me. I was actually trying to see if I could find it for this conversation, but I'll maybe have to share that in another show or in the chat. But he talked about like when we're developing these processes, right, for our teams, what is the magnitude of impact that has on them? And what you guys are doing with regards to documenting these safety procedures, like there's no room for not being excellent, especially because that affects the guest experience.
Yeah,
The guest,
obviously, if you don't have a safe park, your guests aren't going to have
right,
fun. Safety
right,
is always number one.
right. Safety is number one. And it's important for all of us to be safe because the overall industry the overall industry reputation is affected by each other because we are all in this together, and that's why it's so important for us to share information like you're doing today on how people can have a greater impact on their teams, their guests, because they have well documented processes. And like you said, no two rides are the same. The safety procedures probably shouldn't be the same.
Correct.
And we're not calling anybody out here. We're just saying, like, look, guys, there are solutions. There are people who can help you.
There's so many talented, there's so many talented consultants, so many, talented people in this industry that are willing to help. You know, you just have to reach out, right?
You have to reach
And
out.
you know, they're not going to know that you're in that need. You have to know, and you have to be able to self reflect and be, open to, hey, maybe there is some improvement that I could do in my facility, and maybe, I can ask some experts, how I could do this better.
If you were talking to, or well, we are talking to attractions right now in the audience, when you think about what is that thing, like if somebody is unsure if they need help with this, what is that thing that they could ask themselves that lets them know, like, hey, maybe I should talk to an expert about my processes, or talk to an expert about helping me, or talk to somebody about sharing information. What is that? Is there a question that an attraction or an operator could ask themselves that helps them realize that maybe they're not doing this to the best
Well,
of their ability?
sure. Well, I think first of all, again, you could start in small things, right? Or small areas, and there's a lot of um, similar rides or similar attractions in the industry. I think, again, having the conversation, perhaps, if you don't want to go as far as having a consultant look at it, a safety consultant, of the minimum you could do is have the conversation with other facilities that have similar attractions and ask, how are you doing this process? How can you learn from, others in the industry to be able to see, have your check and balance, like, hey, maybe they're doing this, a certain way, and I can learn from that. I think that's important. That's why in terms of AIMS and NARSO and those type of organizations, when it comes to safety, I think it's great because it allows you to go to some of those and see how other parks are doing it. And again, it's leveraging how to get more knowledge.
Yeah, and when you participate in those organizations and you invest in that training and understanding, I mean, you're really investing in the future of your business and the guest experience at the end of the day. I want to also mention something that I don't know if businesses often consider. When you don't, so I'm actually looking at buying another business on the side with my husband for fun. I mean, we are serial entrepreneurs, And, one of the things that comes up in this process is what kind of documentation do you have, right? One of the things that I've known, but now it's having an impact on this buying decision is without documentation, you actually are devaluing your business too, right? Like ultimately, like this is a part of the value of the business is having these processes well documented so that you can grow and scale it. And I don't know if a lot of business owners, because I'll tell you, this was not something I knew when I started in business 20 years ago, was how important documentation is to the value of a business. Did you know that?
Yeah, I mean, I maybe not the way you say it, but definitely we see, documentation is everything.
Yeah.
You can have, yeah, if you think about incident, you need that documentation as to how your employees were trained and what were you inspecting this regularly, and being able to document that and handing it over to your state inspector very, easily makes their job easier and your job easier. And it helps you, in terms of operating at a certain level. Talk to your insurance providers, see what are they looking for. Talk to your
Yeah.
state inspectors. Make sure you put those things in the processes when you're creating these documentations.
Yeah, it was interesting because I helped a friend of mine buy a business a couple years ago, and one of the things that came up in the broker conversation was the processes of the business. And the fact that the company that they were buying didn't have, a lot of processes in place. It was a 100-year-old business, by the way. It's crazy to me that they
Yeah,
didn't have processes in place. And the fact that there are no processes in place actually brought the value of the company, value of the business down for the seller, simply because the the bank saw that as a much higher risk, right?
right.
Because you couldn't
Yeah,
in the team. They saw that as a high risk, like you mentioned, the insurance companies and things like that. So I know we're getting into the weeds of this, but I just really want
yeah,
people to understand how important documentation is to a business. It's fundamentally is the business.
yeah. Well, and also, putting value on it, because
Yes.
that's the other thing I hear a lot. Well, not right now. We'll do it next year or the year after, and there's no sort of this urgency to do this. But it's so important that you start getting this together and being able to go from paper to a digital system, or look at you how you're doing things and improving. That needs to happen today.
Yeah. And when you mention those people who have been with the company for 20 years, having all this knowledge and not being able to pass that on, that's actually a huge risk to the business.
Yeah,
They call that a key man risk, right? Like, so you don't want to be in that position, because it impacts the business not in a positive way when we don't have that. So I know we're up on time. I so
yeah,
appreciate you, Marah, coming on the show today and sharing your wisdom and insights and what you all are doing to help attractions massively succeed at what they do. Because I think you and I probably share the same goal in that we just want to, well, I mean, at least for me, my company only exists to help attractions succeed, right? And I think that you guys from this conversation are doing just the same. And it's so important that we do help each other and we do help each other know what options we have and what supports out there. And I really appreciate what you're doing because I think this even helps me, right? With regards to the institutions and organizations that I'm working with and having a resource to send them to. So I really appreciate you being here so that I could get to know you more, but also we could share this information with the world so they know you're there.
yeah. And I appreciate you having me today, and I appreciate just having the openness to talk about it. And yeah, so Everyone out there, if you know me, I'm an open book. You're very approachable. So anybody who needs help with anything, I'm usually what they call as a connector. I love to, connect people and introduce people to other people. So if you're struggling with something, don't hesitate, whether it's Mobaro related or not. I'm always here to help anybody in the industry.
Marah, how could somebody who wants to connect with you or have you connect them with who they need to connect with, what's the best way
Yeah.
to get a hold of you?
Yeah, so the funny thing is, my email is, and I didn't change it because I thought, well, that's easy to remember because it's at MR, which is, my initials, MR, at Mobaro. But if you want something easy to remember, Mr. at Mobaro.com. So you can email me. You can also find me on LinkedIn or, just reach out and we could set up a time to call and anything of that sort, just the usual ways, I guess.
Well, and what I really appreciate you being here, and we'll be sure to post in our recaps how to also get a hold of you. So if you're watching live or you are listening, we'll make sure that you have the information to connect with Marah. And I know you're a connector. I was so excited to have you here today. Just like I said, I always love running into you at industry events. I have so much fun talking to you, but also I know what you guys at Mobaro and are doing is so impactful on these businesses, and such as and you're such a special person in that way, connecting people with the people that they need to get connected with in order to do what they need to do, and information, and being so willing to share information. I feel like you've always been somebody who's done that. So definitely recommend you guys connect.
I appreciate you. Thank you so much for having me. This has been a great experience.
I'll see you soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Take care. Bye bye. All right. Thank you, audience, for being here today and listening to that show. Wasn't it amazing? I love when we have guests on here who are sharing, and they don't have to come on here. This is hard. It's hard to get up here on this stage, especially if you've never done it before. I know she mentioned this is her first time. She did a fantastic job. So please help me by recognizing all that was said today. Leave us a message in the chat. Hashtag replay if you're listening on replay. If you're listening on the podcast networks, let us know. Like, share, and follow the Live with Sondra show so we can keep sharing this kind of content with you, because I hope you see, like I do, that this kind of content is what's going to help us move our industry forward. It's going to help us connect each other to and connect organizations to those that might be able to help them with that part of their business. I know a lot of you are doing a lot of things really well, but if this is something that you need, I highly recommend and encourage you to connect with Marah. So I'm going to leave you with that today. I'm going to leave you with all this. We really unpacked a lot in this show today, so I know that you've got a lot to think about. But remember the question that I asked at the beginning of the show, and that is, if there was one thing that you could do to enhance the guest experience, big or small, what do you believe would have the biggest impact today? And it's about just making those small steps towards change and improvement. And it is possible just through little tiny things that we do every day. You're not going to be able to do this all today. And processes are live and living things, as she said on this call today. They're live and living things. So it's a process. It's not a destination you're ever going to get to. And so having access to digital solutions that make those changes super easy, but will have big impact, are things that we need in this industry. So thank you again to our guests. If you are somebody who would like to be a guest on the Live with Sondra show, and you've got information that you can share with this industry that you believe would help us improve and move the industry forward, visit livewithsondra.com. We have a guest form right there for you. I'd love to see you. I think we just had we're over 70 guest submissions because there are so many great people in this industry. I can't remember what show we're on. Maybe somebody can post that in the chat. I know we've got one of our producers on the chat here, but all of these people, all 70 of these people have decided that they have information that they want to share with you. So please support our guests. Let them know that you appreciated them for being here today. And like I said, it's not easy getting up here. I know, because I do it and I make mistakes all the time. But you just got to get back up and keep going and get out there, share this information. It's not easy to make change. It's uncomfortable, like we talked about today. So go out there and do it. And yeah, thank you for supporting us. Thank you to my team for being here and for making today's show happen. And we will see you on the next Live with Sondra show. Take care, everybody.